Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be jumping back into Unreal 5 to learn about the sequencer. With the sequencer we can plan out and keyframe camera shots to be rendered as a full animation of our scenery. To get started, we first need to make a master sequence. And to do that, I'm going to go up here and click Add Master Sequence. And with that, it gives me this window, which gives me several options for how I want to set up this sequence. So I can give the sequence a new name and define the number of shots. I could change the duration, so on and so forth. But for now, I'm just going to leave these as is. I'm going to create master sequence. And what that's done is it's created a level sequence actor in my scene, and it has opened the sequencer window right next to my content browser. And all the sequencer window is essentially a timeline where I can plan out my shots and I can start adding camera movements and keyframes and so on and so forth. So to start, it's giving me 5 shots, and all of them are just from the same camera angle because I haven't begun to change them around. If I want to, I could select a few of these and delete them, but I'm gonna hit undo and just leave them as is for now. And to edit my first shot, I'm going to double click this first shot right here. And then when working with the sequencer, it's a good idea to work in 2 panels mode. To do that, I'm going to go up to the top left corner of my panel, go to layouts, and click on 2 panels. So this is really nice because I can use one panel to act as my camera POV, and then I can use the other panel to look around my scene freely. So to lock one of your panels to the camera perspective, go ahead and go down to here and press the little camera icon under camera cuts. And then both of your panels may switch to that camera's perspective. So to free one of them up to look around, go up here to the top left and uncheck Allow Cinematic Control. And now you are free to move around this panel, but this panel is locked. If you would like to control the camera from this viewport, instead of checking this icon, check this icon under the camera actor, and that will allow you to pilot the camera. And if I click the camera actor under here, I can then find that camera in my free perspective panel. So as I pilot around, you can see the camera moving. And of course, I can just manipulate the camera like any other object as well. Controlling it with the widgets is probably a little bit more reliable, but you prefer to pilot your camera directly. If you want to get a closer look at what you're working on, you could either maximize that panel with this icon here, or you could press F11 to full screen that panel. Next, I want to talk about changing the length of our shots, but before that, let's set our FPS. So to change your frames per second, you can do so right here by clicking this drop down, and I'm going to set mine to 24 frames per second. And there appears to be a mismatch between my frames per second in this shot and my master sequence. So I'm actually going to go back to my master sequence and change my frames here. And that's resolved the mismatch. And then to adjust the length of my clip, first I'm going to adjust my working range. So I'm just going to click right here and then move my mouse to give myself a wider timeline, but the shot isn't actually longer yet. Then to change the length of my shot, first I need to extend the length of the shot itself by dragging out this red bar. And then I need to make the camera cut longer by dragging this out here, and it will snap to the red bar. And then finally, I'm going to go to the master sequence. I'm going to rearrange this shot. I need to extend the length of the shot in the master sequence. And if I let go and click it again, I can snap it to the length of the clip. So it's a little bit confusing. It's a 3-step process. So if you get lost, just remember it's red bar, camera clip, and then master sequence clip. Now, if you want to create a new shot, you could either right-click one of your pre-existing shots and duplicate it, or you could go over here and press the plus icon next to shots to add a new shot. And you can select from any of the shots that you've already made, because each shot is saved as a separate asset, or you can go here to insert shot to create a new shot. So with all that in mind, let's go back to our first shot and take a look at some of our camera settings. And to demonstrate some of these settings, let's go ahead and move our camera to focus in on something in particular, like this gravestone. I'm going to give it some more space. So first we have our camera aperture, which defines the blurriness of our camera in the foreground and the background. So right now it's set to 2.8, which is a little bit low. So these plants here in the foreground are a bit blurry, but if I raise this up, those plants come into focus without losing the detail of anything else. So high aperture will have what is called a shallow depth of field, which means everything will be in focus, whereas a low aperture, like if I set this to 1, will have a deep depth of field, which means that only a specific range of things will be in focus. And so with a deep depth of field like this, to adjust what length our focus is at, we can go down to manual focus distance and slide that down. If I just slide down far enough, that grave comes into focus while the background is now what's blurred. And finally, between aperture and focus distance, we have the focal length, which is simply our ability to zoom in and out with the camera. And then below all that, we have our transform, which if we expand this a little bit, we can see we have settings for our location, rotation, and scale. And then like many software with timelines, we can add keyframes to these options. So I'm going to go ahead and move my camera again. All right, and I like that position. Make sure that you are not moving your camera component, but you are moving your camera actor. So if you are ever going to move your camera around, just be sure to double check that you don't have the camera component selected here. Go to camera actor. Otherwise, you will cause some issues for yourself if you're moving the component. And then I'm going to go to my frame 1. I'm going to go to transform. And I'm just going to click this circle right here with the plus sign in it to add a keyframe on the transformation. And then I'm going to go to the end. And I'm going to go ahead and move my camera out here. And once I'm happy with the position, I'm going to go ahead and click the keyframe button again to add a new keyframe. Now if I scrub through, I can see that my camera smoothly interpolates between the two keyframe positions. Now, it's a bit of a clipping issue right here where my camera goes through the mountain. So I could always go in and move my camera position and then just add another keyframe. Just like that, the movement is changed. Give myself a new focal length of about 20. And give a wider shot. And just be sure to hit the keyframe button every time you make a change, because if I pull out my camera like this and I scrub without making the change to the keyframe, then it'll just snap back to that original position. Or if you want, you could click this button to toggle automatic keyframes. So now if I go here and I make a change and then scrub through, that change is retained. All right, and if I just want to play it all the way through, I can hit the space bar and just let it play on its own. And just like my transformation, I can keyframe the camera settings as well. So maybe if I want to start with a really blurry start, add keyframe there. By the end of it, just the focal distance to there. If you want a shortcut to getting the exact focal length that you want, what you can do is you can click your camera actor and then go to your details panel, and under focus settings right here, next to manual focus distance, go ahead and click the eyedropper. And then if you move your free range camera to about where your camera position is at, you can then click the object that your camera is supposed to be focusing on. And that will automatically set your focal distance to the exact focus point that you want. And this works, say, if I were to set this distance. Could again move my free range camera to about the same position. And then I could click this rock and see it's added another keyframe. My focus distance is a little bit different. So let's say I'm pretty happy with that for the most part, but I want to adjust some of the timing with greater control. Well, to do that, I can go over here to the graph editor by pressing this button right here. And then I can click my camera actor. And just like in programs like Maya, we can adjust these graphs to change the transformations over time. If I want, I could dock this right here for easy access. And to just isolate the transformations, I can click the transform category here, and it won't worry about any of the other values. So from there, for example, I could select all of these and just adjust the curves, and it's giving me crazy movement. But you can see how all of these lines correspond to the rotations and location of the camera. By default, all these curves are automatically set to ease in and ease out of their movements. But if I wanted to, I could set them to a linear interpolation. And you can see it's a much more robotic movement between each point. Or I could set it to a constant interpolation. So it will only move to each keyframe and it won't interpret between them. It'll snap between each keyframe. Now, neither of these are particularly great for camera movements. So I'm going to select all these curves again. I'm going to go to cubic interpolation, automatic tangents, just so I get back that smooth in and out. And then what I want to do is I want it to select all these, and I want to toggle weighted tangents. And what this lets me do is if I grab just these tangents and then hold shift and drag them out, what that does is it increases the weight of this keyframe so that it hovers around that keyframe for longer. The result is that it will linger on that keyframe for longer and then speed up into the next keyframe once it reaches this point in the curve. So if I hit play, you can see there's a much faster movement right when it hits this point. And then I could counter that by increasing the weight of these tangents. Like that. And now it goes slowly and then speeds up really fast and slows down again. Now that can get a little bit clunky, and especially because I'm in the middle here, I've increased the weight on both sides. So what I want to do from there is I'm going to go to cubic interpolation, user broken tangents. And that way I can adjust the tangents on just one side, so that I can have a lot of weight on the left side and much less weight on the right side. Working in the graph editor can be pretty complex, so if it's a big headache, then you can just avoid it, and you can get a lot of what you want out of just keyframes. But the graph editor is there for you if you want to have really precise control. So now with the shot pretty much how I want it to be, I can go ahead and go back to my master sequence, and you can see that it will just jump to the next shot, and the shot after that, the shot after that. So I want to go ahead and set up all these shots the same way I did the first one before I then move on to rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little bit more time in the master sequence and just give myself a little more space for this shot. And I'm just going to get to work. So I'm working on this new shot right now that is very still. There's not a lot of movement. So I want to liven it up a bit and add a little bit of camera shake. So adding a little bit of camera shake in moderation can make your shots feel a bit more cinematic. So to do that, I first need to make a camera shake actor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my content browser, and I'm going to find a folder to put it in. Let's say cinematics. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and right click and go up to create basic asset, blueprint class. And a class in short is basically a programming term for a sort of template that describes a thing. So pretty much everything is a class of some sort, but that's not something you need to worry about. We're not going to be doing any programming today, but we just need to make a class for the camera shake. So I'm going to go and open up this drop down to do a search for camera shake. I'm going to go down to Camera Shake Base and select that to create a new blueprint class. Let's call this Camera Shake 01. Once I've created that, I'm going to double click it to open it. And the first time we open it, it'll show us this graph here, but we don't really need to look at this. If we just close it and open it again, it'll give us a condensed version of that window that only shows us the things we really need. And then under Camera Shake Pattern, we need to select a Root Shake pattern. And bring this down, and Perlin Noise should work just fine. And once I do that, this turns into a dropdown, which gives us options for adding camera shake, both positionally and rotationally, as well as FOV, which would be the zoom, which I don't know why you'd want to do that. And then options for the timing of your camera shake. So I'm going to go ahead and move this window over here out of the way. I'm going to go back to my sequencer. I'm going to go down to camera component. And over here where it says track, I'm going to click the plus sign. And we go up here to camera shake. And here we have our camera shake actor that we just created. So I'm going to select that. And you see here in the timeline, it's now added that camera shake to our timeline, which we can just scrub to over here. Just fit it to our shot length. Now, the first thing we want to do is go into timing. And we want to change this duration. Currently, the duration is set to 1, which means that the camera shake will go for 1 second, and then it'll stop. We don't want it to stop, though. We want it to just play indefinitely. So to make it indefinite, set the duration to 0. And you can see that now that camera shake has filled up the entire timeline. Then with that taken care of, I'm going to go up to rotation. And there's 2 values here, which are the amplitude and the frequency. So the amplitude is going to be how much it shakes. So let's set it to something ridiculous like 10. And if we go over to here, and if we press play, we can see it's going all over the place. Far more than we would want. That is just going to make people sick. So I'm going to set it to 1. And if we set the frequency to 10, see it's shaking way too fast. So we want to play with subtlety here. Less is more. So 1 and 1, even that's a bit much. I'm going to set it to, let's make it 0.5 on the amplitude. 0.3. We're very close to some of these objects, so that shake feels really extreme. And there, that feels a bit better. From there, I could even adjust how much it shakes on the pitch, yaw, and roll. So if I wanted to, of course, increase the amplitude of the roll. So it's maybe 10. See, it's really twisting around. I'm partial to less roll, so I'm going to set this to 0.5. There we go. If I want, I can close the rotation, drop down, and then in my location, we have all the same options. We can change the amplitude, the frequency, and we can change all these individually on the X, Y, and Z axes. So by default, there is a location amplitude of 1. I'm going to set it to 10. Just see what that looks like. And again, it's moving all over the place. And I'm going to set this to something really low, like 0.3 as well. I'm going to go back into my rotation, raise that up to 0.5 to compensate. And there. I think that looks pretty good. Finally, go ahead and hit save, just to save your actor. And then when you're done, you can close this window. Now that I've got all my shots set up, I'm going to go ahead and render all this footage out. So to do that, I'm going to go over here and click this button here to open up the movie render queue. And then from the movie render queue, if I want to change my settings, I can go here. And then from here, I have options to change things like my output directory. So for example, right now it's going to save in my Unreal project. That's fine. I'm going to hit cancel and just leave that as is. And I can change the file name format, which by default will be my sequence name followed by a frame number. I'll leave that as this as well. Following that, you can change your output resolution. By default, it's at 1080p. That's fine. All this is fine. And from here, if I want, I can go up here to add a setting. And one of the main things is I can change what my export is. So by default, it's going to export JPEGs. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to PNG sequence instead. So now it's set up to export both PNGs and JPEGs. And then I'm just going to toggle off the JPEG sequence. And after that, I'm just going to go ahead and hit accept. And then I can go down here to render local to start my render. And then this pop-up will show up. And it will take a little while to compile all your shaders and get ready to render out the best possible quality version of this. When you're rendering out like this, it won't be literally real time in the sense that it won't be going at 24 frames per second because it needs time to save each screenshot and everything. But overall, this is still going to be far faster than rendering out in, say, Maya. And once it's done, if you left your directory as the default, it should be in your project folder, saved, movie renders. And just like that, here is my entire image sequence, which I can take into my video editing software of choice and string together. And it's really as easy as that. This is, of course, just the tip of the iceberg for what you can do with the sequencer. If you were to get really into programming, you could start adding in character animations and events that trigger at certain points in your sequencer. But this is just a nice intro to this part of Unreal. So with that, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.